Hey there, it's Kathy with Sycamore and Cotton, and I've got some really cute and fun projects for you this week. I hope that you are a fall and Halloween person. If not, well, stick around anyway, because I guarantee you're going to find these 3 projects really cute, really fun, and really adorable. So let's get started. This first project is a really fun Halloween cloche. I'm using this silver plated tray that I picked up at the thrift store for about $1. And I had originally started painting it white to use it as a different project, but then decided to pull it out and use it for this Halloween cloche after seeing some really super cute Halloween cloches on Pinterest. So a coat of black paint. This is just an acrylic paint. I think it's maybe Apple Barrel brand. I set that aside and then pull out the little ghost that I had made. Honestly, just playing around with some old air dry clay. I've had it in my stash for probably 3 or 4 years. It's a big block from I think it's Crayola, maybe the brand. And I bought it when I first started wanting to do air dry clay projects. And this, when it was a fresh clay, it worked better, but it certainly wasn't appropriate for the things that I make now using air dry clay with the IOD molds and other molds. But anyway, I was just playing around, just seeing how effective it would be to continue working with, and made these little ghosts with really no intentions of what to do. I had no thought at all of what I would do with them. I was just wasting a little time during the day. And so I decided to get those out and paint them up, give them little spooky ghost eyes. And I set those aside and I pull out that air dry clay. That's a big clump of it right there you can see in that bag. I actually have 2 of those big old bricks and haven't even opened the other one. So I still just playing around with it just to see how much I can still use it, and decide to start making some little pumpkins. And so these are super, super easy. I just rolled them in clumps of the clay in my hand, and then make it the size that I want. And then I just take a paintbrush and start making the hollow or the lines around the pumpkin to give it that dimension. And I just, honestly, these are so fun to make. And I, other than doing things like this with the cloches, I'm not even sure what all I can use them for, but I just want to sit and make them all day long, because you can make different sizes. You can make squash, you can make the traditional orange pumpkins, paint them up however you want to. And I just really had a good time with this. I just used the tip of my pinky finger to make a small indentation in the top. You can make the stems out of the clay as well, or you can go outside and get some little twigs. That works really nicely. And at one point, I just took a teeny tiny piece of aluminum foil and made a stem out of that and then painted it. So you can be as creative as you want to get these. And they just turn out so cute. Oh, I hope you all will try this. This was so fun. And I discovered that I apparently have a penchant for making miniatures. And I really didn't know that. But they are fun, and there are lots of things you can use them for as accessories in the larger projects. To paint them up, I started, of course, first with some pumpkin orange, I believe is the name of that color, pumpkin spice maybe. And then I decided to pull out a couple of different colors. One is cashew, the other I believe is moss. Those are Waverly paints. And I just really quickly go around painting and don't even change my brush out. I use the same brush even when I start dipping in the different colors, and that just helps it all blend together and give it that organic look that I was hoping to get. And these are just super easy, super fun, and I just enjoyed making them. I hope that if you try these, you'll enjoy it too. When I started making the witch's hat, unfortunately, I was not filming because, honestly, again, I was just playing around. I never dreamed that I would end up using these things. But if you saw last week's video where I made a witch's hat in a couple of the projects that I did, I used basically the same steps, except for this one, to make the top part of the hat, instead of using a cone or a foam cone shape, I just used a piece of aluminum foil, the same that I did for making the tip of the hat on those larger ones. And for this one, I just used a piece of aluminum foil, shaped it like a witch's hat, and cut out a round circle to be the brim of the hat, and then just glued those two pieces together. Then I painted it black, and then while it was still wet, as I'm doing right here, I sprinkled some cinnamon. This makes the project smell good too. I sprinkled some cinnamon on the hat, and then here what you see is me sprinkling cinnamon on the silver tray, which actually was more of a saucer. I think it actually had been a plaque that had an engraving on it, but it's been a while and I've painted over it, so I'm not 100% certain. So now I'm putting together the cloche, and you'll see a little bit of green styrofoam sticking out of the bottom of that ghost, and me putting some moss around it. And I did that because I wanted the ghost to be sitting up just a little bit, because I don't want it sinking down into the moss, because it would cover part of the bottom of the ghost. And I also want the ghost to sit straight. Putting it on that moss, it tended to lean forward or backwards or sideways, and so I'm going to actually glue the ghost onto the tray, and having it elevated just a little bit above the moss, I'm able to make it look like the ghost is sitting on the grass instead of leaning in the grass, I guess. I hope that makes sense. And I wish now that I had videoed this from the front instead of an overhead, but I wasn't thinking about that, and I think you'll be able to see well enough to get the gist of what I'm trying to do here. So now, after getting the ghost in place, I'm taking the little pumpkins and placing them in around the ghost. I did have to make sure that the cloche would fit down around the moss, so I had to keep scrunching it around and scrunching it in to make sure that it wasn't hanging out, and that the glass also would sit level. That is a glass. The cloche part is a glass from the Dollar Tree. So a lot of cloches have either a knob on the top or something that you can lift it with, and I wasn't sure, but I decided to use, you guessed it, or did you? I decided to use the hat. I think it probably would be okay to use it as a knob, but I would be careful for whoever buys this, and I think I have a buyer for it already. But I thought about using a pumpkin, but then decided to go with the witch's hat. And I did use Tite Bond Quick and Thick, so it should be, it should be secure enough that you could use it. The glass itself is not heavy, so time will tell, I think. And here I've just taken a little tiny stem off of actually I think it came from a cinnamon broom that I had a long time ago, and it started coming apart, and I saved the branches, and I just took a little bit of that and glued it down beside the ghost to make it look like a tree. And I glued the pumpkins in place and added a little bit of moss to cover that glue. Wanted everything to be secure in there and not to be moving around when whoever has this picks it up and moves it around, or when they store it. I don't want it coming apart. And here we go. I love how it turned out. I love Halloween. I don't get to decorate, or I don't decorate at home a lot because our grandson's not usually here and we don't get trick-or-treaters. So this was fun for me to do. Tell me, do you enjoy decorating for Halloween, and do you get many trick-or-treaters? Next project, I skipped ahead to this point where I had already made all of those air dry clay castings, and I did that because that's a lengthy process, and I think most of you have seen people using air dry clay and molds and turning them out and making castings and applying them. So I situated them while they were still wet. I situated them on the canvas that I'm using, which actually this is an old cabinet door that I got from Habitat Restore for $2. But I situated the pumpkins the way I wanted to build the stack, and then the additional greenery that I added around the bottom and some acorns that I added on the sides. And then once I got everything in place, then I glued it all together. And using Waverly paint in the color Sandstone, I just gave a really light first coat. I didn't even get all the parts of the pumpkin, well, I did do all the parts of the pumpkin or all the parts of the air dry clay, but I didn't do all of the frame. What I wanted to do is get one coat of paint on the air dry clay so that I could leave all of that to dry overnight and then come back in the next day, which is where I am now, and do the finishing on the project. By painting your clay while it's still wet and then allowing it to dry helps to prevent cracking, and that seems to always work pretty well for me, though there usually will be some cracking involved, especially in such a large scale project as this. For the greenery on this, I am using Waverly paint in the color Moss. I love this color so much. It's such a pretty shade of green. When I was painting the night before with the sandstone, I did use a little bit of the green to see how I liked it with this color. And but when I came back in the next day when everything was dry, I did go over everything in the sandstone. And now I'm going back and just painting all of the greenery in this moss green. There had been some minimal cracking as it dried, and I thought that paint might cover those cracks, but it didn't. So I made a slurry of the air dry clay, just mixed it with water enough to thin it down so that I could paint it in there. It's about the consistency of paint, or maybe even a little bit thicker, but I just dipped my brush into that slurry, and once I started doing it, I realized there were places all over it that needed this. So I took a few minutes and did that, and I hadn't used slurry before. I knew that it was a simple process to make it and to use for cracking, but I'd forgotten about having learned about that some time ago, had never used that. And then Bailey from Reclaimed Grace, she's one of my favorite YouTubers out there, she had mentioned it and used it in one of her projects, and it might have even been a similar project that she did, because actually this whole topiary or pumpkin stack, however you want to call it, I had gotten the idea from Bailey. And there was another a picture that I saw on Pinterest as well that I liked, and so I put the two together to come up with my project. But check Bailey out. If you have not watched Reclaimed Grace before, I promise you, you will love it. I didn't want to leave brush marks on the frame part, so I pulled out my dauber, and after brushing on one coat of paint, I'm now going over with a second coat of paint by daubing it on or stippling it on, which is just a pouncing motion using a dauber, so that I create a kind of texture instead of leaving brush marks. And I do that all around that edge. Y'all, I am so sorry that I missed getting footage of more of the details, but what I've done here, as you can see, I have painted the acorns and the stems and curlicues around the pumpkins in brown. Now the acorns are in a nutmeg brown, and the stems and the curlicues are in a what is that color? Burnt umber. Yes, burnt umber. And when I got those done, it was a little bit brighter or darker than I wanted it to be, because I want this all to be a very neutral and muted piece, but I don't want it to be just the sandstone and green. I wanted to add a little bit more by bringing out the details of the acorns and the stems. So I lightly took some sandpaper over that to take off just a little bit of those brown paints and even the green. And what you see me doing now is applying a little bit of clear wax over top of everything. And the reason I'm doing that is I want to apply a black wax, or I want to be able to control the amount of black wax that I leave behind once I start wiping it back. And when you have clear wax, that gives you more control when you use that first. And so now I am brushing on the black wax, and I did actually use mineral spirits with that black wax because, again, I did not want to have a very dark effect, and so by using the mineral spirits to thin down my black wax, I was able to have even more control over the amount of wax, dark wax, that I leave on there. So that's what you see me doing now. By the way, that Fusion clear wax is lavender scented. I had ordered the plain, and that's all that Emily had when I ordered it. And she called me and said, hey, do you mind if we switch this out? Because it's the same thing, it's just one is scented, one is unscented. And I said, sure, because I also have a piece of furniture that I'm going to be using that on the inside to freshen up the insides and to give this old 100-year-old piece of furniture, just to give it a nicer fragrance than what it has. But anyway, that lavender scented wax came from Emily at J. Bowen and Company, and she's also one of my favorites. So check her out. You'll love her work as well. So after wiping back as much as I could with my shop towel, as you see here, I used a wet wipe to take even more of that dark wax off. And I'm sorry I don't have footage of that. I don't know what happens to my footage sometimes. I go back and forth between projects, and I guess I just forget to turn it on sometimes. But anyway, here we are to the finished project. I want to know your thoughts on the neutral tones of this. Would you have rather had a more colorful, fall-colored, traditional-looking pumpkins, or do you like it the way it is? Let me know in the comments. Okay, on to our final project, and that will be turning this Halloween jack-o'-lantern that you see there into an upscale piece of autumn decor. I start by pulling out, I think, 3 of my molds that have leaves in them, because I want to cover that pumpkin in different shapes and sizes of fall leaves. And so here I'm just making several to begin with, and then when I get several made, I will start applying them to the pumpkin and just keep going back to the molds as I need, because I'm really not sure how many it's going to take, and I won't know until I start applying them just how I want this to look. So anyway, that's what I'm doing here, and then I'll jump forward to putting them on the pumpkin. And here you can see I have several different sizes. I also pulled out a mold that has acorns with it, and made several of those castings as well. And I don't know what I was thinking, but this is not nearly enough. I think I go back and make at least 2, if not 3 more batches like this. But anyway, here I'm just taking my fingers on each of the castings where little tiny pieces of clay clung to the shape. Sometimes those little tiny fragments are still attached, and you can just use your fingers. You can just use an X-Acto knife if you need to cut some out. Here I'm also using the end of my paintbrush. It just helps me get into those curves. So I do that on all of these castings that I've already made, and then I start to apply using Tight Bond Quick and Thick glue. It's important that you get your glue over every surface of the casting, because you want to make sure that there's glue everywhere so that it attaches firmly to whatever you're applying the casting to. And you'll want to use your fingers and tap very gently along the edges of the casting, just to make sure that every surface is adhered down onto that item that you're using. Now, Sometimes I use my fingers to spread the glue. That gets really, really messy. So here I'm using this tool that came in something I ordered the other day. I don't even remember what, but I have several of those, and that's a cheaper version. So I thought, oh, that would be great for spreading the glue. I have used, as I said, my fingers in the past. I've also used popsicle sticks, but use whatever is your preference. And here's what it looked like at the end of the evening when I decided to take a break for the night and go upstairs, and then I'll start fresh in the morning. So I think I have just a few more of the smaller castings to add, because you can see I've got smaller ones there on that one side. So I will be adding a few more of the smaller leaves to mix and mingle in around with the larger ones as I did on that other side, so that there'll be more of a balance between the sizes of the castings. I let these castings dry overnight without painting them. One is because them being smaller, they are less likely to crack, but also I really wasn't sure what color I wanted to use, so I just let it go. Next day I come back and I add those smaller molds, and then I am using a slurry again to go around and just fill in any places where the clay had in drying, it had lifted a little from the pumpkin around some edges, and anywhere there might have been any kind of little crack at all, just fill it in with the slurry. And that actually is probably my favorite way to fill in those areas now, because it just works so well for that and is much easier to apply than the air dry clay itself when you're using it in its full capacity, or plaster, or not plaster, but spackle that I have recently used. I think this slurry works really well. I want to say thank you now to all of my viewers, whether you're a returning viewer or if you have just discovered sycamore and cotton. I hope that you will find value in what I present, and I hope that you'll return, like and subscribe, and engage in the comments. I truly appreciate each of you. I finally decided that I want to paint this pumpkin in the color Sandstone from Waverly. I love this taupe color, and I give it 2 good coats to cover that orange really well. And here I'm just applying a clear wax, because as mentioned earlier, the clear wax makes it easier to remove your colored waxes once you've applied them. So start with the clear and then move on to the colored wax, especially if it's going to be a dark wax. And I'm not sure which wax I want to use. I can envision it with using both a white wax and a black wax. So I put it out there on my social media, asking my viewers and followers what they suggested, and overwhelmingly everyone said dark. Some said white and then dark, some said dark and then white, but I went with the dark I went with the white, and then I went with the dark. And this is what it looked like after wiping back the extra white wax. And to be honest, I like it this way. I think for myself, I probably would have just stopped there, because I do really like this look. But because I put it out there for my my friends on social media, they went with the dark, so I followed up with the dark. Again, I did thin down the wax by dipping my brush in mineral spirits, and you know why I do that. It's to leave less of the black wax on there. And I just started wiping it back and going around the whole pumpkin, adding the wax in sections and then wiping it back. I apologize for the shadow here. I was actually filming while using the other hand to do the work, so it did leave a shadow because I have a bright light that shines in at my workstation, and it sits behind me. So my apologies for that. To further scale back the intensity of the black wax, I use a wet wipe after having wiped as much back as I could with the shop towel. And I also pull out a brush, and anywhere there is a heavy area where the wax has settled, I use that brush to kind of spread it out and thin it out, and so that it doesn't pool in those little crevices. And here it is. Let me know if you think I should have left it with the white wax, or if I've done the right thing by adding the dark wax. I like it both ways. I think for myself, if I were keeping it, I would have preferred it with the white wax, but that's okay. There'll be someone out there who loves it just the way that it is and wants to have it for their home. And one last thing I wanted to show you before the end of the video. I've been wanting to do junk art for a long time, and in looking at Pinterest, I ran across something I had saved quite a while back, and it was pumpkins or jack-o'-lanterns made out of trash. So I have been saving things that I thought would be useful, and had a block that I had made into a pumpkin that hadn't sold, and so I took off the lettering on that and the floral that was added to it, and here I have turned it into this jack-o'-lantern. It was so fun. I'm sorry there's no video. I hadn't intended on sharing it, but it turned out so cute. I just had to share. Let me know what you think of it. Thanks again for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Leave a comment, and I'll see you next time.